The Unfolding of a Nation, the True Story of America. In the beginning, there were only whispers, a strip of colonies hugging the eastern edge of a vast, uncharted continent, 13 of them, each different, each stubborn, but united under the heavy hand of the British Crown. These were the 1700s, and the world was ruled by empires. Britain, the most powerful of all, taxed its colonies to fund wars fought oceans away. The people in these colonies worked the land, built their homes, paid their dues, but over time, they began to question, why are we paying taxes to a king we'll never see? Why don't we have a voice? From that seed of doubt, revolution began to grow. It didn't start with muskets or war cries. It started with paper, pamphlets, speeches, tea tossed into Boston Harbor. But Britain answered rebellion with redcoats and rifles. In 1775, colonists were killed by British soldiers in what would become the Boston Massacre. The moment was frozen in public memory, fueling anger that would not die. By 1775, it was no longer just talk. In Lexington and Concord, the first shots were fired. The British Army expected to crush the rebels quickly. They didn't expect the spirit of a people who had nothing, but were willing to lose it all for freedom. The man chosen to lead them was George Washington. He wasn't a king, nor did he want to be, but he carried the burden of becoming a symbol of order, of resistance, of hope. At Valley Forge, his army froze, starved, and nearly broke, but they endured, and by 1781, with help from France and years of sacrifice, the British surrendered at Yorktown. The impossible had been done. A new nation had been born. In 1787, the U.S. Constitution was drafted, a document so bold, so revolutionary, it dared to give power not to kings or lords, but to the people. It created checks, balances, freedoms. It also, tragically, allowed slavery to remain, a contradiction that would haunt the country for nearly a century. But the people pushed forward. The 1800s were a time of vast change. In 1803, President Thomas Jefferson doubled the size of the nation with the Louisiana Purchase. Explorers Lewis and Clark trekked west into the unknown, discovering landscapes, native tribes, and the bones of what would become an empire. As settlers poured westward, the idea of manifest destiny took hold, the belief that it was America's fate to stretch from sea to shining sea. But that dream came at a price. Native American nations were pushed, betrayed, and destroyed. War with Mexico brought Texas, California, and more, but also questions. What kind of country was this becoming? Free or slave? These questions erupted into a storm. In 1861, the United States turned on itself. The Civil War was not just a battle of regions, it was a moral reckoning. Over 600,000 Americans died, more than any other war. Cities burned, families divided, but when the smoke cleared in 1865, slavery had been abolished and the Union was preserved. President Abraham Lincoln, who led the country through its darkest hour, was assassinated just days after victory. His death marked the end of war, but not the end of struggle. The years that followed, Reconstruction, were filled with both hope and betrayal. Freed slaves gained rights on paper, but not always in practice. Racism, segregation, and violence remained. Still, progress marched on. The late 19th century was America's industrial awakening. Steel, oil, and railroads transformed towns into booming cities. Immigrants arrived by the millions, passing through Ellis Island with nothing but hope in their pockets. They built railroads, worked factories, carved out lives in crowded tenements. The Statue of Liberty became more than a monument. It was a promise. By 1900, the United States was an economic powerhouse, but the world was growing unstable. In 1917, the nation entered World War I, fighting alongside allies to push back tyranny in Europe. It was brutal trench warfare, and though the war was short for America, it left scars. When it ended, the country tried to return to normal, but the world had changed. The 1920s roared with jazz, flappers, speakeasies, and new technology. Radios filled homes, cars filled roads, skyscrapers climbed. But beneath the glamour, speculation bubbled, and in 1929, the bubble burst. The Great Depression began. Banks collapsed. Jobs vanished. Dust storms buried farms. Families lost everything. Bread lines stretched for blocks. People jumped from windows. It was the closest America ever came to falling apart. Then came Franklin D. Roosevelt. With calm resolve, he offered a new deal: public works, social security, hope. Slowly, America stood up again. But just as recovery began, the world exploded once more. December 7, 1941, Pearl Harbor. Japan's surprise attack dragged America into World War II. Factories turned to war machines. Women filled assembly lines. Young men went to battle. On D-Day, they stormed the beaches of Normandy. In the Pacific, island by island, they advanced. And in 1945, 2 atomic bombs dropped on Japan ended the war and started a nuclear age. America emerged victorious and powerful. The post-war years were golden. Suburbs grew, the economy boomed, the baby boom began, but the peace was uneasy. The Soviet Union, once an ally, became a rival. Thus began the Cold War, fought not with battles, but with fear. At home, a different war brewed. In the 1950s and 60s, African Americans fought for civil rights. Rosa Parks refused to give up her seat. Martin Luther King Jr. dreamed of equality. Marches filled the streets. Laws changed. The Civil Rights Act, the Voting Rights Act, but hatred didn't disappear. America reached higher. In 1969, with the world watching, Neil Armstrong stepped onto the moon. One small step for man, a moment that proved the impossible was possible. But hope was tested again. The Vietnam War divided the nation. Watergate broke trust in leadership. The economy faltered, yet America endured. The 1980s brought renewal, economic revival, cultural shift, the dawn of computers. By 1989, the Berlin Wall fell. The Cold War ended without a single nuclear bomb fired. The world had changed. The 1990s were an age of optimism. The internet connected people. The economy soared. New voices rose in music, film, and culture. And in 2008, history was made as Barack Obama became the first black president of the United States. But peace is never permanent. September 11th, 2001, a date that changed everything. Terrorists hijacked planes, crashed into the World Trade Center and the Pentagon. Thousands died. Fear gripped the world. America went to war again. In Afghanistan, then Iraq. Homeland security was born. Civil liberties debated. Patriotism surged, and so did division. The 2010s brought rapid change. Smartphones, social media, AI. New movements rose. Occupy Wall Street, Black Lives Matter. Politics grew more polarized, but innovation never stopped. Tesla launched electric cars. SpaceX reached the stars. LGBTQ+ rights advanced. Medicine leaped forward. Then the world paused. In 2020, a virus silenced cities. COVID-19 brought fear, loss, and uncertainty. Over 1 million Americans died, but science responded. Vaccines created in record time. Communities came together. And though scarred, America endured again. Now, in the 2020s, the nation faces new challenges. Climate change, AI, economic shifts, deep political divides. Yet America still leads in technology, space exploration, military power, entertainment, and global culture. It is not a perfect country. It never was. But it is a place built on struggle, on reinvention, on voices rising from the ashes of conflict. From 13 colonies to the world's most powerful democracy. From muskets to Mars. From cotton fields to silicon chips. This is the United States of America. A nation in progress. A story still being written. And the next chapter? That's for us to tell.